Folks, this is Book Talk with Corbin, and I am your host. And we have with us a great speaker, someone I was really looking forward to interviewing, is Dr. Lawrence Reed. Let me tell you a little something about this brother. He writes a weekly op-ed for El American. He is president emeritus of the Foundation for Economic Education in Atlanta, Georgia. And he's also the author of Real Heroes, Inspiring True Stories of Courage, Character, and Conviction. And his latest book, one of his best-selling books, is Was Jesus a Socialist? He released that one, folks, in June of 2020. Brother, thank you so much for joining us.
Brother Corbin, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Folks, as you know, we don't talk long. Our guys are busy. Our guys, our gals we interview are busy. They got to get back to their work. So we always go straight into it. Sir, brother, you did this article called 4 Ways Socialism is Antisocial. And you made a couple of comments in there. And I just want to read those comments to you and get you to elaborate a little bit more on what you said. Is that okay?
Oh, yeah, fine.
Okay. One thing you said here is how do socialists define socialism? And one thing you say here, one comment you made, it is communal utopia where everybody gets an equal portion regardless of effort until they all starve. Boy, that was so hard, man. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Okay. Well, that's unfortunately the actual track record of communal socialism. There isn't an instance in history where it didn't break down fairly quickly and people just gave up on it. And the reason is it runs afoul of basic human nature. I mean, you can't tell people, regardless of your effort, regardless of your input to the process, how hard you work or how hard you save, things like that, regardless of all things that you might do, you're going to get no more than anybody else. Even the slackers who are happy to sit back and let the rest of us do the work and then get an equal share of whatever is produced. That just doesn't work. It falls apart in no time. And really, thank God it does, because it discourages things like productivity and investment and energy and entrepreneurship, all the things that we have to have in order to produce the things that we need to eat and to use and to enjoy. So communal socialism, whether it be with the Pilgrims in 1620, or even the early Christians who abandoned it back in the days just after Christ's crucifixion, it just doesn't work. It flouts human nature.
You know, brother, as you were talking, I also just quickly came to mind about Vice President Kamala Harris. And she put out a video where she said very clearly that she also wanted a society where there would be equal outcome. Is that part of that socialist utopia you just referred to, or communal?
Yeah, it's the same kind of thinking. It's the praise of the common as opposed to the uncommon. And when I think of the great achievements in world history that solved problems, brought people together, that improved standards of living, that helped to solve poverty and so forth, these come from not, just average run-of-the-mill people. They come from the uncommon people, the ones who took the great risks, who worked so hard, who saved, who used their talents in ways that benefited others. I don't think we should be encouraging everybody to be what they're not, which is equal. We're not equal. We're different in terms of our talents, our ability and willingness to work, what we put aside in terms of our savings, you name it. We're not the same. If God made us as a bunch of robots, yeah, then you'd have a case for a wise central planner to just program us all.
Right.
But that's not the way we're made.
Right. Brother, let me quote you, give another quote here out of that article. Socialism is rightly and widely perceived as diametrically opposed to capitalism. So it can't possibly be acts of sharing, caring, giving, and being less or being compassionate toward the needy there's demonstrably more caring, sharing, giving, and compassion towards the needy under capitalism.
Yeah, in fact, this even shows up in the form of government to government foreign aid. Almost invariably, the direction of foreign aid is from countries that are largely capitalist to countries that are largely socialist. And that's because capitalism has the stuff, we produce the goods and services, and socialism has most of the problems, including poverty. So, yeah, it should be self-evident around the world that countries that are relatively free or capitalist do so much better in a material sense than the countries that are not free economically. It's just common sense as well as actual experience.
So let's talk more about within the United States. You know, we always heard these stories about the robber barons and how vicious and evil they were and things like that. And you sort of like, speaking for myself here, just got the impression, wow, we didn't become a more compassionate society till the Johnson administration's Great Society programs.
In actual fact, Corbin, and this is borne out by study after study, the actual numbers from the US government and other sources, poverty was steadily declining year after year after year, with few exceptions for generations, until Johnson's War on Poverty. And since that time, the mid-60s, the percentage of the population living below the poverty line has pretty much stagnated. We haven't made the progress since the War on Poverty that we were making before the War on Poverty. And that's because when you have a relatively free economy, you have opportunities for people to produce and create and invest and be entrepreneurs and to move to where the jobs are. And we've never been a perfect nation. We've always had to work hard to implement the non-discrimination and in the application of law, for instance. But by and large, Americans in 1950 were far freer and far more economically prosperous than they were in 1900 or 1850 or in 1800.
And you're saying this is something this isn't just your opinion, but this is this is based on research, facts, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. It's in fact, anybody can go to my website, lawrencewreed.com, contact me, and I'll be happy to send them the links to the backup documentation.
Okay, that website, lawrencewreed.com, did you say?
Yes, LAWRENCE, middle initial W, last name REED, no punctuation in there, lawrencewreed.com.
Now, brother, can we also get your book, Was Jesus a Socialist, at that website?
There are links on the website to where you can get them. I think to whether it be the Foundation for Economic Education or maybe it's Amazon, I'm not sure. But that book is readily available. You can start by visiting my website, or you can find it on any major online bookseller like Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
And I've been hearing nothing but good things about the book. I'm going to make sure that I'm going to get not just one copy, but 2, 3 copies. I wanted to share it with some other, one I wanted to share with my mentor and one other brother in my men's group. What moved you to write that book? I mean, that's a fascinating title.
Well, I've always been interested in this topic, Corbin. I know as far back as college, because I wrote an essay way back in college on this subject for a class. But it sort of simmered with me for decades. And then in recent years, with the rising chorus of people calling for socialism, I also heard more people like Bernie Sanders actually saying that Jesus was a socialist. And I thought, that's just nonsense. But I decided really to research it by reading and rereading the New Testament multiple times. As a Christian, as well as economist and historian, I found through my rereadings of the New Testament not a single portion or passage in which it can be said that Jesus was expressing sympathy for socialist ethics or socialist economics. Quite the contrary. He was a defender of honesty and of private property and voluntary contract. And through his parables and his other teachings, it's clear to me that he never advocated turning any aspect of your life over to the government. In fact, think of this: if he were to appear today and speak to an audience of, say, 1,000 people, and if he were to say, "Okay, tell me what you did for the poor," do you think he'd be impressed if people started raising their hand and saying, "Oh, well, I voted for the politicians who promised that they would take care of that"?
Wow.
I don't think
Right.
he would say, "What? You voted to empower politicians to rob Peter to pay Paul and
Right.
get the job done at twice the cost?" That wasn't my message.
Right. 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 And we got to conclude here, but I want people, you gave that website address. I want people to go to that website address. Folks, I want you to read his articles, particularly this article. We just sort of touched upon four-way socialism is antisocial, and buy his book and buy a couple of copies and give one to your pastor. Buy a couple of copies, give one to your mentor. Buy a couple of copies and give one or two out to ladies in your women's group, men in your men's group. This is very important because I have been hearing, particularly from a lot of young people, this whole Christian young people, this whole interest in socialism. And I take a different track. I just sit there and say things like, well, maybe you want to check out why there's all this destruction of churches and persecution of Christians in the former Soviet Union. But I think your book would be more effective in sort of giving them the truth of this situation.
Well, thank you, Corbin. I appreciate it.
And I strongly encourage people to go to that. Brother, I'm gonna ask just one last question as we wrap up here. Are you as you said earlier, Bernie Sanders, he almost got that Democratic Party nomination.
Yeah.
Now I'm vehemently opposed to that guy, and I'm not with all that socialist stuff anymore. But I felt, my Lord, he was cheated. I thought he was cheated he was cheated from getting that nomination. But what I found astounding, and again, I'm speaking to somebody who's involved in the socialist movement back in the late 1970s, that he almost got the nomination.
Yeah.
So I was stunned.
Yeah. It's a sad commentary.
It is, brother. What do you? I know you could probably spend 2-3 hours answering this question, but try to give us some sort of sense of what happened. How did that happen? What's going on?
I think, unfortunately, Corbin, because in part what's being taught and not taught in the schools and the abandonment of educating their kids by many parents, what we have is whole generations now don't really know what socialism is, and they don't know what capitalism is. It's opposite. They've been told in the classrooms that socialism is just caring and sharing and helping people and giving them things. And of course, that's the bait. That's not the hook or what ultimately actually happens. And capitalism, they often think is, oh, well, that's just cronies using the government to get special favors. But as a believer in capitalism and free markets, I'm against that sort of thing too. I don't want to empower the government to pass out favors and privileges and to anybody, least of all major corporations. So there's just a misunderstanding of what these two things, socialism and capitalism, really are and what they actually deliver.
Yes, right. Can't agree with you more, brother. Brother, I want to thank you for your time. This is Book Talk with Corbin, folks. We were just speaking with Dr. Lawrence Reed. Please don't just listen to this interview once. Listen to it a couple of times. Go to his website. And I just want to sound like a broken record here. Read his articles. Buy that book, Was Jesus a Socialist? And don't just buy one copy. Don't be selfish. Buy a couple of copies and give one away. It's a very important book. We need more and more people to read it. Brother, I'll be in touch, okay?
Okay, thank you, Corbin.
Thank you, brother.